Back to Cocktails, Code, and Conversation as we are getting ready to get into a very good conversation. Because look, let me tell y'all, this is like one of the only podcasts I actually plan. And I'm gonna tell y'all why I planned this, because one of the topics we're gonna talk about today, I saw it come across my news feed and I read the article. And the first person I thought, I was like, I am gonna have her on this podcast. We're gonna talk about this. Like this, it had JaNae Johnson written all over it. So I'm super excited about this conversation y'all getting ready to listen to. But first, before we get into all that, right? I already told you what her name is, but I'm gonna let her introduce herself because she got to get the floor. Y'all know every single guest on this podcast is special. So we're gonna give a very special welcome to Miss JaNae Johnson to the podcast.
Hey, and I got a little applause. I love it. I love it. Oh, a double applause. Okay. So, David, thank you so much for having me today. I am extremely excited to be here. We have had a conversation offline, but also we've had a live conversation before. So I already know it's going to be dope. It's going to be fun. And we'll dig into some things. But a little bit about me. I'm the owner of CTM Unlimited. And we are a human capital consulting firm, but our keen focus is eradicating systemic racism in corporate spaces. And the way we do that is we basically are going into companies and flipping the tables on ineffective D&I initiatives. Sometimes they're ineffective because they don't exist. And sometimes they're ineffective because they've been around for too long and they've lost their way when it comes to really having some sustainability and really seeing results. And so, as you can imagine, it's been a very interesting last 8 months or so. But I love it. I love it. And I'm so excited about what the next 8 months or so will bring.
All right. And you know what? So you were saying that tagline there, and that hit me. Like, I'm very big on words, right? I've always been a word nerd, like whatever. I think I, was the only kid that had a thesaurus or knew what a thesaurus was, like at the age of 7, whatever. Like I just,
you weren't alone. You were not alone.
But the fact that, so part of the tagline was eradicating systematic racism in corporate spaces.
Yes.
Like, we gonna chill right here for a minute, because that's like,
let's do it.
That's a powerful statement, though, right? Because there's ways that, and having spent the last couple of years around marketing people, right? There's so many ways that you can say something, right? And certain words have a certain impact, and the analogy I always give. So, for people that are of Christian faith and read the Bible, right? There's all these different versions of the Bible. Like there's King James, there's New International Version, like American Standard, or something like that. There's all these different versions, basically translations from the Bible. And it was always interesting to me when I would read it, because certain words just have a different meaning, right? Even though they're synonyms, right? So the fact that you chose the word like eradicating systematic racism, right? Because you could have just been like, making it easier for, or, getting rid of, no, eradicating, right? Yeah. Because that word in itself, if you're reading that, it's going to stop you. You're going to be like, number one, you don't hear it very often. Mm-hmm. So you look at it because, to eradicate, like that's like, you are doing something like with purpose. Like, I'm about to eradicate these roaches up in his house. Not like I'm about to try to get rid of them. No. Eradicate. Like,
get rid of all traces of it.
Any trace of their existence, right?
Yes.
So, I love that. So can you talk to me a little bit about, like, is that, like, was there like a journey or process to come up with that? Or is it just like, it just hit you and you was like, nah, this is what we're going to go with?
Yeah. So, I think it came out of my own trauma, to be honest with you. It came out of understanding what it felt like and what it was like to walk into offices where I was the only person who looked like me, to walk into boardrooms and have people question my credentials, have them question why I was there. And even just that feeling of knowing that you're doing your best, knowing that you're outperforming your peers, but still having that weight and that burden every single day. And that was just my experience from working in various corporate companies, but also working as a contractor for a while. So just kind of jumping around as a third-party contractor and going in and out of these different companies and always getting the same kind of side-eyed look and also the questions, right? And so I know that stems from bias, and a lot of that bias was because of my race. Some of that bias was because of my gender, and some of it was just people being who they are, right? So for me, the eradication of that is, I think about that one single person. So I think about the JaNae who is right now employed in a corporation who is showing up, who is doing her best, who really has aspirations to move forward in her career, but feels this feeling of, okay, I know I have this weight that I have to carry every single day because I know that the system is not set up for me to win. And so that's why it's about looking at the systems that are already in place, because a lot of times people will say, oh, the system is broken and we need to fix it. Now the system is actually working exactly as it was designed to work.
Right.
So it's designed to keep the people in power. And so this for me is not just a business. This is about a movement. And I believe that if we start with one company and one leader at a time, then eventually that one leader and that one company influences another company, and then influences another and another. And eventually, when my children, my grandchildren look back, they're not going to have that same JaNae experience of walking into a room and someone questioning them just because they're Black.
Right.
So that's it. Beyond that, I will say that this last probably 8 to 10 months or so, and going all the way back to the killing of George Floyd, that was a catalyst, because we were already doing the work as far as just, leadership development and training and et cetera. But I made a judgment call and made an executive decision to say, we will only focus on those kind of activities that are around eradicating systemic racism. So yes, do we still do training? Do we still do leadership development? Do we still do coaching? Do we still do change management? Absolutely, but only within the lens of, is this helping to eradicate systemic racism? And I think it's because, the image of George Floyd being killed was not just about this complete disregard for human life, right? But it was also a metaphor of what it feels like to not be able to breathe. Like to walk into a space where you know that you belong there, but to feel like you could not ever catch your breath. And that's what it felt like to me, working in corporate. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping other people get rid of that feeling and being able to thrive.
Yeah. And that's, I've had conversations offline about it with, a fair amount of my network, some white, some, Southeast Asian, just everybody, right? Just kind of talking about like the effects of, kind of what George Floyd and what we saw, right? And what I would bring up and take a step back is like, in the moment, what I realized was like, this was not just like one incident. This was the culmination of a lot of things that had happened that affected not just here, there were protests around the world about it. This wasn't like, this was literally like, as a kid who came up and I like studied like everything about the civil rights movement, I ate it up like it was, it fascinated me that there was a time, and, I was able to, even at a younger age, I was able to understand, like, it wasn't that long ago. Like there was a time where this was life. Like people were hosed down and dogs were sitting, like there was a time where like I couldn't, like me and my mom just couldn't walk in and sit down. Like I grew up in California, right? One of our favorite things was read calendars, right? We would just, we would go sit down, read calendars, have brunch, whatever. We get a blueberry muffin, like, and I know it's a simple thing, but like as a kid, I was thinking there was a time where we couldn't do that, like at all. Like, and this wasn't like centuries ago. This wasn't like, this was literally, half a century ago, 40 years ago, like a couple, like generation, to where there's people that were alive that in my family I could call and talk to, and they would tell me about, well, how it was like when they had to, hang out with their friends and things of that nature. And so, all of this was, to me, as it was happening, I was like, this is this generation's time of our civil rights movement, right? That we need to take a look and see that, yes, we've progressed, but we've kind of lost some things in there. And I think especially to bring it to like the corporate America, and for me, what I've seen in the tech world is what happened, and what I saw, awaken within people was that we had just accepted a certain line and just said, well, we got complacent. Like, well, we reached it because they allowed us in, and we're here, and we're doing these things. But look, we got, and we've had a president, and we got we got some wins, so we're good, right? And so when we did that, what happens is we became silent. So when the little things happen, right, that we would see at work, when somebody would be silenced at work, or when somebody would get looked over for a promotion at work, we weren't saying anything because we felt like, you know, maybe we're complacent. Maybe this is good enough. And what happened is in that moment, right, when people, and to this day, like I still haven't seen it and I refuse to do so, only from my own personal, like, I know I can't take it in. Like it's go. I just know. I know what's gonna happen. And I'm like, all right. But like, I think in that moment when people saw that, it shook everybody up out of the little dream state that we had put ourselves in, and it forced people of color to look around. But more importantly, it forced white people to look around and go, "Yo, this really ain't right. Like something's wrong here." Right now, it did reveal some stuff that was like, for the people was like, ain't nothing wrong with that. Like, oh, it's not. Well, hello, sir. Like, let's talk about that. So it revealed that, but more often it let us know that like everything's not okay, right? And I think there was it was the greater population of people who truly are allies that just never knew what to do, what to say, or kind of like felt something was wrong, but was like, nah, I think everything's okay. That was the moment that was like, no, it's not okay. And by the way, let me show you why it's not okay and why this is going the way it is, because now you're dealing with 40 years of pain that I've never been comfortable to tell you or address to you about.
Oh my gosh,
right? So now that just reverberates itself throughout everywhere. I mean, think about it. In 2 days, right? In 2 days, we had protests in every single state in this country. Right? In a week, we had protests in New Zealand, right? Like, all saying the same thing. That to me is, you know, there is a connective energy that connects every single human being. I truly believe in that, and we won't get into all that or whatever, but it's like stuff like that happens. Like that's what proves to me that it's true. Because how across the world, right? Yeah. Within days, like you have all these people shouting out against this one pain. Why? Because we're all feeling it. And so I'm hoping, right, that with all the craziness we had in the past year, that like this is the turning point where things will never be the same, because we'll start to look and address and say, look, we've got to make this better, right? And that's part of the things that now, you know, I'm kind of looking back and you know, because I'm petty, so I go back on LinkedIn and I'm looking at all the posts. Yeah. I'm on Twitter and I'm looking at all the, you know, we stand by this against systematic. Okay, and we're going to do this. I'm like, okay, cool, thank you, I appreciate it, right?
Yeah, where are you with that though?
Right, and I'm gonna roll up on my watch and be like, "So, what's good though?"
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Like when you drop that first
period, that's all. Like when I say first quarter for us is all about accountability. Like it's really rolling up on, and this is not just from accountability from people that I don't really know, or, you know, companies who have said things publicly. It is about that, but it's also about some of the prospects that we have in our pipeline, you know, companies we've been in conversation with, because I want to know, like, so where are you with that? Because you said you were going to do XYZ. We talked to you about what you can potentially do to move the needle. You weren't ready for that, but what have you done? Right. Like that's just where we are. I think the other piece I want to go back to, something you said, David, about like this whole notion of our own silence. So when I say our own silence, like as Black people, how I can't tell you how many non-Black people kind of were shocked when I started speaking out about this. Sort of like, well, I mean, we knew that racism was like a thing, but we didn't think it was you, JaNae. Like you haven't experienced, not you. You're like, right. You're like our safe Black person, and you're happy, you're not angry, and you know, and we see other white people accept you. You're right. So it was this kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, but do you understand this off-color joke that somebody made at a company happy hour just 2 years ago? Or do you realize what happened when I went to enroll my infant son in daycare and they told me they don't take public assistance? And that was in 2018. Like, I can't tell you about those things because I never felt comfortable enough, because I didn't want to be the one. I didn't want to be labeled. Right. But I also had to have a personal reckoning with myself, like, hey, I got to tap into my own courage too. So just like I'm calling on people who claim to be allies, like, hey, you have to have that, what I call corporate courage. I had to have my own first. Yeah. Like I had to set the example. And that was to have enough courage to talk about, yes, these are the things that have been happening. And no, I've never said anything to you because I didn't think you got it. And I also didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. And so this whole time I've been prioritizing your comfort over what I really needed. Like, I'm not getting what I need because I want you to be comfortable. And I got to have a reckoning with myself. Like, that's not serving anyone. It's not serving them. It's not serving me. It's not serving my people. So I have to do something different. And so it was a change for me too, because it's not like I've been like the way I can describe it is I've always been kind of a little bit of Malcolm underneath and Martin on the surface. Like, that's actually a lot of Malcolm underneath, Martin on the surface. But what 2020 did for me is that Martin left the building. Like, I don't know, I can't find Martin. It's only Malcolm. This is what you get, right? So I had to like make that shift and also say, hey, you know what? I understand that this is risky. I understand that not everybody is going to rock with me, and that's okay. But this is what I know I'm called to do right now. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's so funny you say it that way, like with the Malcolm and Martin reference, because if I had to put it that way, like, I'm Malcolm wearing a Martin mask, and I've always been, because I related to Malcolm so much more than I related to Martin. I couldn't, if I'm real, like I remember reading, I used to get frustrated reading about Martin. I would just get frustrated. And I'm like, yeah, I don't get this, right? And I studied Malcolm X. Like, I read his autobiography like 2 or 3 times by the time I was like 9 or 10.
Oh, wow.
Something like that. And I just, it was, because it was more so, and I saw a lot of people kind of reference a lot of his, there's some YouTube speeches that he has out there now. And I think it's one of those things that I felt like this. When I was younger and I would talk to a lot of my friends and we would, have our Black History Month. Now I was blessed enough to be in advanced classes in California. So I was in a different track. So we studied like a bunch of history stuff, like all the time. So I was always studying different things, but I would have conversations with, my Black friends, and they, we would talk about Martin, all the stuff, or whatever. And when we talked about Malcolm, like, we wouldn't talk about him a lot. This was because in the regular school system, like, Malcolm was given like a day or maybe like a couple of days or at most a week, but he was talked about in a sense of like being this radical and outcast, like still kind of different. They would contrast them all the time. And what I found out, it was like, part of it was because Martin, in his background as a preacher, right? So yeah, when you're a preacher, you're talking to everybody. So you're talking to they use the analogy like the sheep. They're talking to the flock, right? I got to bring it down. If I'm talking to a bunch of people, right, I got to bring it down to a level that the entire flock understands. So if I'm talking to a congregation, I got to talk it to where I got to make sure all my congregation gets it. My point going, there's a lot of things that Malcolm talked about was down to a level that everybody could understand and connect to, which made sense. Malcolm talked at a completely different level. Malcolm talked a lot more about like self and the esteem in yourself and how you looked at yourself and what that meant from a systematic standpoint and the system that was being put upon you. And it was things that I don't mean it like at a level like education wise that you couldn't understand. It's a level of, are you ready to have this type of conversation? Right. There's levels of maturity of a conversation that we can have. We can sit down at the bar and we can shoot shit and be like, all right, whatever, and talk about cool. But then if we start getting into existentialism or, rocket, like there's just levels. There's like, whoa, like maybe I'm not ready to have that conversation. I think for a lot of things with Malcolm, you had to be ready to have that conversation. Like even if whether you believed it or agreed with him, right? And I saw a tweet the other day where a gentleman said like social media is the cause of why people can't no longer like disagree because it's got to be this or that. I was like, no, social media just revealed that. We lost the ability to debate a long time ago. Right. Like we lost the ability to like, okay, I might not agree with whatever you're saying at all, but that don't mean we can't talk about it. That don't mean we can't sit and have a civil conversation. That means I got to be mature enough in my ability to communicate to go, okay, I disagree with everything that just came out of JaNae's mouth. Yeah. Right. But I need to disagree with what she's saying and attack what she's saying, not her. Right. There's a difference. There's a very subtle difference in the maturity in your communication standards to be able to do that. So I feel like that was Malcolm's level, right? He was forcing you to think and interact and communicate at ways that most people just weren't ready to accept or have yet. And I think as I noticed that as people got older, they would go back and then be like, yo, wow, like I never like, I was like, yeah, because number one, the propaganda that they played you was his angry speeches. And they would give you the comments of of when he was angry, or when he was, I won't even say angry, when he was getting passionate about something and telling you to stand up for yourself. Right. But then they don't play you the whole thing when he starts breaking things down about why it's important and why you need to feel this way, why it's so important that you need to have the confidence in yourself, right? To know that there is nothing that you cannot accomplish. So there's nothing deficient about you, right? Oh, now it's a different conversation, but most people don't get to that part of my Malcolm. So
they get the sound bites.
Right. That's it. They get the sound bites. In my pocket. Like, okay, cool. Like they get everything else that we want to that we want to put out there, but the real thing. So I'm gonna back up off that rant because we will never leave that. I'm trying to tell you.
No, but I love it. So the thing about, I think if we take from Malcolm's life, there is this whole thing where he forced you to engage in discourse that might have been uncomfortable, but it forced you to engage. Like you can't just, I'm just gonna sit and listen. Like it forced you to form an opinion one way or another.
Right.
And it was a clear call to action, right? Not just a sit back and let's wait and see what happens, or we're gonna follow this path of diplomacy to get things done. It was, I'm going to force you to engage in this discourse. And I think there's something about that. There's an element to that is still very relevant in 2021. Like we're at a point in time where we've had enough, like, let's just sit back and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then also let's follow the proper protocols, right? So let's check these boxes and let's do step 1, step 2, step 3. So we've done that. And then if you look at the product, the outcome, it's like, well, where are the results, right? Which is one of the things for me, like when we're talking to clients, I'm just like, okay, so you all have had a diversity for how many years? Like a program, a department, a chief diversity officer. But so why do your numbers look like this? Like where is the representation? Like what has happened? Like you've done the stuff, like you're doing the stuff, but what's the outcome? Like where is the, like I'm waiting for the tangible result, the ROI on what you have invested in terms of time and money over the last however many years. And I think that's the big part that's lacking. Like, where is it? I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. And I think, it's gotta be clear cut objectives of what you want to get to, right? I think a lot of companies start off and they just say these broad objectives. By 2025, we're going to increase by blah, 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 whatever. We're going to do these things or whatever. Okay. That's nice. But like, what are you say that now and you give yourself, I think, Google did this, and I'm gonna pick on them a little bit, and I could be wrong, but whatever. Come at me, Google, have fun. Right. But because they announced it even before this happened, the George Floyd thing. I remember a couple of years ago reading about, hey, we're going all in on diversity, because it was them, like Facebook and a bunch of other companies. We're going to do this, we're going to expand all this or whatever. It's like, okay, great. And then nothing. Like they're big about doing these big press releases and saying these huge numbers, how they're going to increase it. So then, but based on that, like, what are you doing like every year to go, okay, are we on track? Are we doing this? Are we doing that? And then you get there and go, oh, we didn't get it. So let's do another big one. But no. And I'm just like, okay, so that, we've seen that happen, right? And so it was kind of like, when I saw like these big announcements coming out after the post George Floyd thing, I was like, okay, whatever. I just took them with a grain of salt. I was like, but what I'm really going to start looking at is what activities are you actually coming out and doing, right? I noticed more people picked up, and I don't know if this was a cause or effect, or if it just caused me to look at them more. Like I started seeing more diversity reports like at the end of this past year. I was like, okay, cool, right? Nice. I was like, I don't remember all these companies always doing this, or maybe they're just making a bigger deal when they're putting it out there because they want the press. That's fine. But there was something that I talked about recently in one of the podcasts where I was like, look, they're putting them out there. So now it's up to us, this community, all of us, allies, everybody, to go, okay, yeah, but these numbers, this ain't acceptable. So like, that's the biggest thing, is where's the accountability? Because they really don't have anything, because it's like, give a 9-year-old a test, right? An open book test, and say, and you can set the limit of how many you get correct and how many you get wrong. You can set how many questions you have to answer. What they gonna do?
They're gonna be like, oh, I got one right and I got 100.
Like, you know what I'm saying? And that's literally what these companies are doing. It's like, okay, all right, well, we're gonna say this, and then we're gonna make this the goal and this the goal. Like, and I'm reading, I forgot what report it was, but I'm reading one report, and their overall percentage of minorities, period, was like 6%. But they wrote like an entire 3 paragraphs about how they increased over 300%. I was like, you hired 4 people and you like what
we're not gonna make the numbers now. Like that's what we're and I've seen that too. I've seen we're gonna double our representation of Black people on our board, but you have 1. So you double it to 2 and then we celebrate that. We're not gonna play those games. Now what I will say is that one of the ones that stuck out to me was Salesforce. And Salesforce actually put their numbers out in 2019. I think they started doing this sort of like Equality Matters. And their numbers are in very Salesforce fashion, very like interactive dashboards. You can filter, right? So you can kind of see like, oh, I want to see where they are with Black women in leadership, or I want to see where they are with Black men in tech. So you can filter by tech, non-tech, leadership. And so what's so interesting is that even though their dashboard is very the user experience is nice, but the data is trash. It's like, and not from a data quality standpoint, but just like, oh, y'all only have 3%. Like what? Like what is this? You know what I mean? And so, and they have all the stuff. Like they have someone looking after supplier diversity. They have someone looking after the workforce diversity. They have someone looking after diversity education and external partnerships. And then when you look at their numbers, you're like, okay, but what is happening? Like, why is this not this? You would think it'd be so much more impactful, but I do applaud them for telling the truth about themselves. Yeah. I applaud them for not doing that whole, oh, we've increased this by 300%. And you know that it's still way below what it should be. Yeah. I can appreciate the fact they laid it bare. Like, yeah, go ahead and take a look, filter, slice and dice like you want to. You're going to come to the same conclusion. We got a lot of work to do.
Right.
So I can appreciate companies that are doing that. I want to see, it's one thing to do that in 2019. It's another thing to do that and show some progress in 2020. But at the end of 2021, like, I don't want to see those same numbers,
right?
With plus or minus a margin of error. Like I need to see more.
And here's the thing: like I'm super critical of any company in the tech space because I'm like, look, literally what we do all day, every day is innovate. Like you're talking to somebody who started as a software engineer. Like, so you can't. I don't want to hear that it's too hard of a problem. Like I don't.
All you do is solve problems. Right. That's what you
do. Here's why I don't want to hear that, because in the last 10 years, you know what we've seen? We've seen virtual reality become a thing, right? Which we've been working on for years or whatever. We've seen improvements of that. We've seen improvements of how we deploy architecture. You can literally run an entire company in AWS and never have a server. You can build apps now and not even know how to code. Like, so I don't want to hear in the tech industry about, I really don't want to hear excuses at all. Like, quite frankly, I was like, because no, like this doesn't, if you have the same passion and the same drive to go innovate over here, then that means you have the same, you can find people with the same passion and drive to go innovate here, right? Just because it's not coding, just because I can't go get 100 coders and throw at it, right? Oh, now I actually have to go get people and have them, I don't know, like be empathetic and start thinking of different reasons and saying, okay, well, hey, maybe, we keep hiring 100, minorities, but 90 of them quit in 3 years. Maybe we can start looking at our culture and what that really means.
Perhaps. Maybe that's right?
it. Let's dig a little deeper into these stats and say, okay, since we're so numbers driven, right? Where are we seeing the greatest amount of turnover? Why does it seem to be in this division or this branch of our, organization or this or that or whatever? Because here's the here's the big secret, right? That for those of us who've worked in the industry, we know it's not a secret. Like, there is a very ugly and nasty, masculine and toxic culture within corporate America, and specifically like within tech, right? And the more you poke and prod at this, you're going to get to it that, hey, sometimes your most successful leader, as far as a business standpoint, that moves the business, right? Create more revenue, does all these things, is single-handedly the reason why you will never increase your minority representation, because minorities be around this person and go, I'm good.
Yeah. I'll go elsewhere. I'll switch industries.
Like, I'm okay. Right.
That's exactly what happens. And I think it's you know, the notion that and what I've seen a lot of companies attempting to do is just what you said. Oh, we're going to up our recruiting. We're going to partner with HBCUs. We're just going to get more talent in here. We're going to make sure we focus on diverse talent and attracting them. And we're going to start the talent pipeline all the way back to high school. And we're going to just build partnerships and all of that. And it's like, you could do all of that. But if your culture is shit, no one will stay. And the data actually proves that, particularly when it comes to Black professionals, that you can look at the attrition numbers and see that, oh, okay, there must be something with the culture. So, you know, we saw this even with Wells Fargo in 2020. They lost 7 Black female executives to other financial services companies, right? 7. They didn't have that many to start with, right? How you lose 7 in 1 year?
Right.
It's indicative of the culture. So you had one that went to JP Morgan, you had another one went to Equifax, you know, they went to different places, but it's because that culture was not such that they felt like they had a reason to stay.
Right.
So yeah, I on that.
Yeah. Look, and here's the reason why. So I believe that everything has a process, right? And so I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, so first we get everybody to start actually looking at their data. We'll get the reports. That's nice, right? The next thing that I'm seeing, and maybe, you know, this coming year is when we start to see this, is like, because you're going to get to the point to where the numbers point to now, let's start actually looking at and dissecting your culture and figuring out, what are we going to do about that? Like, how do we start handling that? Because here's where you know if, as a company and as a leadership, if they're serious or not. Because if you're presented with the fact as a CEO and go, okay, I have to choose between actually creating a culture that will allow me to meet my diversity and inclusion goals, right? To where everybody feels comfortable and can thrive, or get rid of 2 or 3 key successful business people in my organization, right? That's when we can really start having the conversation, start to understand, like, this is what it's going to mean, right? You're going to have to either work with them to teach them, is like, look, you can still be successful in a different way that you're doing it now, right? Or you can say, well, this is what I always work. We don't go with this, because, you know, this D&I stuff don't really matter anyway, right? We don't really see what it means, and that's the part where, you know, the petty in me is like, I want to get there, because I go back and be like, oh, I can't wait to hear. Okay, yeah, okay. So this data points to this. So what are we gonna do about it? Right. I'm waiting for the dancing. I'm waiting for the moves. I'm waiting for the shucks and jives, everything, right? Well, you know, we're going to continue to look at this, and, you know, we're going to strive for, okay. Yeah.
Oh, baby, it's already happening. That's the thing. It's the whole, we're going to continue to listen and learn. So I hear that, the listening and learning, how long exactly does it take to listen and learn? And at what point do you move to action? Because you have listened some, and you have to have learned something at this point. So you can't tell me that, oh, I can't do anything. I can't apply any of this until I learn. It's almost like if you're in college and you say, yeah, I can't do any application until I learn the entire theory. So my first 3 years of college, I'm not going to apply anything at all. I'm just going to sit and absorb. I'm going to study theory. I'm not going to apply anything. And then when I feel like I got enough theory, then I'm going to start application. That's not how that works.
Exactly. It's like, no. So look, professor, I'm not saying I'm not going to take the quiz. I'm just saying I'm going to take it when I've read the whole book. So as soon as we get through the whole book, then I come back to take the quiz.
Right. You want me to take it on chapters 1 through 3, and I'm just like, nah, I'm not. I can't do that.
Because I need to know what happens in 12. You don't understand. Like, 12 is everything, professor. If I don't get to chapter 12, I don't feel comfortable in what I'm read 1 through 3. So yeah, I mean, look, it is. I will be one of the proponents, like, pushing for this, even, you know, within, you know, my organizations that I work for, you know, making sure that we're continuing to build and it's, for me, it's a culture about everybody, but obviously I relate most likely to the Black experience, because that's my experience.
Right.
But, you know, one of the things I've enjoyed with this podcast and getting a chance to meet and talk to so many different people is, like, hearing the different perspectives, right? Like, even from like an immigrant perspective, like people who like move to this country and start their careers here, like what they go through, right? And I'm just like we have so many of these issues, right? I'm just like, to me, and it's probably just because how my brain works, and like I said, I'm a computer scientist at the end of the day. Like, what I always tell people is, like, why I loved everything about my computer science degree, because I understand the theory of computing. So because I understand that, I can program in any language I want to. It doesn't really matter. I can go pick that up because at the end of the day, I know the theory behind it. And I've always kind of felt like if you understand the underlying root of the problem, like everything else is just simple. I can fix the root, like everything else will be not fine, but like I will get a lot of the other things and then I can start, focusing in. But like just going at this, well, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to go hire 30% more women. Great. But you hire them and then they feel like their voice isn't heard, or they feel like, they don't want to be a part of an all boys club or this or that or whatever. Like there's other things there, right? Then it's like, okay, we hired all these women and then they all quit, right? Or they don't stay, or they stay where they're at. Here's the other one, which is really interesting, right? People like, they will look up and be like, I don't want to be management, right? So they'll do, I've heard people do this. I don't want to go into management because I don't want to be like the people that I see up there.
Yeah.
That's not me. So therefore, I'm not management material. The most damaging thing you can do to somebody's career is now it's like, well, I'm not this. I'm not like them. I don't want to be around them. I don't want to be like them. Therefore, I'm not good enough to be that. So I'm just going to stay right here. And whatever it is it's a software, whatever. Like you just decide, I'm going to ride out right here. Not necessarily because you want to, because you've convinced yourself what you saw is not something that you want to be. So therefore, I'm just going to stay here because that's the only way that I can be there, right? Is to be like that.
Yeah, I think you also have you got people who know, like they're clear that they are better than what they're seeing, but they know they don't want to be associated with that. So what they do is they retire on the job. So that's the other element, right? So when we start talking about productivity and how that kind of bad behavior that continues to be endorsed and tolerated by your executives, when your other, really motivated talent sees that, they're like, okay, so that's what they're going to allow.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to collect this paycheck every 2 weeks. I'm going to max out these benefits. I'm going to get all of my elective procedures because I got this good health insurance plan. And I'm just going to chill for the next 3 years. And so then when you look at that, how much talent and productivity are you missing out on as an organization?
Right. So,
okay, one person does that. It's not, okay, fine. Maybe it doesn't have much of an impact. But you start to multiply that, because what happens is even if it's someone, let's say is a white man, right? But they see the bad behavior that's tolerated, then they will say, you know what? I don't even like working here. Like, this is weird. I don't know why these people are like this. So I'm going to effectively retire on the job. And so how many people do you have sitting in seats right now who are retired and you just don't know it? Like, they didn't submit a retirement letter, but they are retired. They are doing enough. They have learned the system enough to create enough smoke and mirrors to make it look like they are at the optimal productivity, or they're making excuses as to why they can't be. And it's really because your culture is so toxic that they don't want any parts in it, but they are looking at it as a means to an end.
Right.
And
that influences indirectly everybody that's around them, because people are going to look at like, oh, well, I mean, so I'm just going to watch Joe and see what Joe does. Oh, this Joe does? All right. Well, I'm like, I think we, as much as we can talk about all this stuff that we love to talk about in tech, like at the end of the day, like human beings are human beings. Like we are social creatures. And so we will look to assimilate to whatever's around us. Like, that's just what we do, right? Like, so like, all right, so you bring up a whole bunch of people about Joe who's retired on the job. Let's say it's 5. At least 3 of them also gonna retire because they're gonna look at Joe. Well, I mean,
yeah, well, I'm over here working hard.
Right. If Joe doing that, I'm gonna do the same thing, right? Exactly. And then to your point, like it kind of goes from there. So it's yes, we have a lot of work to do, but that doesn't that actually it excites me, because that means like, look, there's things there's room for us to change and make it different, right? And realizing the fact that I will I'm comfortable in the fact that, you know, I've done enough in my career, right? Not that I'm done yet, but I've done enough where I'm just like, okay, cool. Like, now let me make it better for everybody else that's coming, right? Yeah. Like, I want them to have an even more amazing experience and experience all the great things that I've experienced, but even better, right? And I think I'll give that to the wisdom you get from getting older. I know, like it's we all go through this cycle, like when we're younger, it's like, and this is old, and that's old, now so whatever. But and I remember I used to hear this when I was younger. Now I finally get it. I was like, the wisdom you get with age and just time, like if if I could take it and bottle it up and give it to people, it's like, boy, y'all don't understand. It's just like when you have time, when you've had time to see things and experience things and go through those, right? That's what drives you to go, now I can actually have an influence and make things better. Right. And that is like, there's a joy in the fight, in the pursuit, when you're building, when you're younger and you're going for something. And there's also joy when you've been through some things and now it's like, you know what, I can make this easier.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and how exciting that is like, okay, I can remove these obstacles from you. And now I can sit back and watch and see how far you go and just have complete joy in what you've accomplished.
Yeah.
Right. And the only part I'm gonna take is like, I was able to help make that easier for that person to get there. Right. Like that, so this side of it to me is so fun fun and exciting, because it's like, I get to go find someone to do some work that I can look back on and be like, yeah, we gonna make some noise and we're gonna make some changes. So with that, I want us to segue real quick to this. The whole reason, right? That, well, not the whole reason why I wanted to have the podcast. It was big. Yeah. Like one of the main reasons I was like, we're gonna talk about this. So NASDAQ, right, came out and said they wanted to make a proposition to the SEC and basically said, hey, look, this is what we're gonna do. We want to require any security that's listed, right, on NASDAQ, that they had to meet some diversity requirements on their corporate board. And I don't have the exact numbers. I think at least one on their board, but maybe a little bit more than that. But they had to have an underrepresented minority. So, minority, women, LGBTQ on their board. Now they came out and said they wanted to propose it to SEC, said they wanted to make that, like, if you did not have that, you were going to get delisted from NASDAQ, which when I saw that, I was like, oh, they swinging.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's a big deal. Now, I was totally happy when I saw it, and I got super excited, and I was like, I got to talk to JaNae about this. We got to dig in. Like, I'm like, man, like these are some big things. Now, when I started to read it a little bit, get some of the details, they watered it down a little bit. And I was like, okay, I get it, right? Like anything else in a negotiation, you gotta do some give in there. But overall, right, the fact that they were coming out and making a step and saying, look, we're going to do this. This is going to be a requirement you're going to be having. Like that's anybody that doesn't understand that in the corporate world, at the end of the day, if it doesn't affect the bottom line, like it's just not going to make it into priority of things to do, right? And I think sometimes the hardest thing for people to understand is like, this is running a business. A business is about revenues and profits.
It is.
Right? So the things that I'm going to manage are what's going to affect my revenues and my profits, right? If I have, regulations that I have to meet that come with fines or prevent me from being able to do that, then those are going to get priority, right? And so as much as I would love for everybody to do the right thing in the world, at the end of the day, it's not going to happen. Sometimes we need sometimes we need a little push to do the right thing. Just like when we was kids, right? It was like, mom and dad would like, go do this. It was like, I don't really want to do it. I gotta get a little push to do the right thing.
It's like that now. Will we really just voluntarily pay our taxes if we weren't getting a little push from the IRS?
That's very true.
Like, come on. Think about people who are employed. Like, would you really just, let me go ahead and write this check to the IRS every 2 weeks because they didn't take it out of my check, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure? No, we would not.
That is very true.
Because human nature.
I sure wouldn't. I'd be like, oh, you didn't do it? Guess you better get next time.
Go now. Sorry.
But yeah, so as we look at that, I want to get your initial, thoughts to it. Just what comes to mind when you see this from NASDAQ?
Yeah, so I guess let me talk about the things I want to celebrate first. So I celebrate that there is an element of public disclosure in this, right? That it's not just, I'm going to do all this under the cloak of secrecy. If I am a company listed on NASDAQ, there is a requirement in their proposal that there's public disclosure in terms of how they've been able to have representation on their public board. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate the bold move because perhaps it will be a signal to the rest of the financial industry, right? So if NASDAQ is doing this, then where else could this be done? Like, how else could this be replicated? Sort of as a model. And honestly, I think it is, while for some companies, they are going to struggle because, for decades, they have had 100% of their board be white or male or Never have they had anyone from the LGBTQ community represented, right? So they might struggle. But for others, they're not going to struggle very much because they're like, oh, we'll just add one, right? So I think in a way it's good, but in another way, it's sort of like, okay, this is a very low threshold. Like they're asking for 2 on your board, like 2 people. And it doesn't have to be 2 Black people. It can be one that identifies as a minority, another one who identifies as LGBTQ. So you have this huge pool. Basically, you can get anyone who is not a white male on your board and you can meet those requirements.
Right.
I do think the public disclosure is important because I would be looking for, okay, did you just take the easy way out on this, right? And did you just do the bare minimum? So are you a C student or are you an A student? Because the C student is going to be like, oh, okay, so you only want me to do these 2, fine. We'll go ahead and pull in these 2. I'll call my friend, my buddy over here and tell them to nominate someone, right? Like, so they can do that. But I do think the public disclosure is a big piece. Now, beyond the threshold being kind of low, I think there's also this out, right? So this whole thing that I can just write a note as to why I didn't turn in my assignment and you gave me 2 years to turn in my assignment is crazy to me. Like that part is crazy. That's insane because it's like, well, wait a minute. So what would even be your reason? Like, I would love to see any company even have an explanation for this, because it's not because you have they have given you such a broad stroke, right? So you couldn't find anybody, like nobody, like in 2 years. You could find anybody. And what I would want to see, even like, not just, hey, we couldn't find anyone because of this reason, but I need receipts, right? I need to see the steps that you took to secure this diverse board member and how, it fell through because you selected 2 people and they declined, or your company went bankrupt and you all had to file for Chapter 11, you had a reorg. Like, there needs to be like an act of God, something catastrophic. Like, this is what I'm going to need. And even then, you still couldn't find 2 people,
right?
In 2 years, it's 2 people in 2 years. So I just wonder how NASDAQ is going to handle that if and when you have these companies that come back and kind of like turn their little note in, like, yeah, so we tried, but it didn't really work out.
Right.
So then what? Like, what is and I haven't studied it enough to know like what the consequence is going to be, or what they're even asking for from support in terms of the SEC. But from a regulatory standpoint, then how does that then affect that company's standing, right? Like, so are there penalties from the SEC if you don't meet this threshold? Like, that's the part. So again, it goes back to the accountability, because otherwise I can look at this as, a leader of one of these companies and as an executive and say, oh, we can kind of phone this in, or we can delay this, or it's not a big deal. Let's just go ahead and start preparing our note as to why we couldn't get it done right now. And then we'll be good, right? Well, let's just go ahead and file the exception right now. So I think it's just going back to what we were talking about with all the different statements that are coming out and the different actions too, that there has to be a strong and sustainable accountability model. Otherwise it doesn't work. Otherwise it's just a good idea.
Right.
But then we'll be, talking about this good idea 5 years from now and be like, hey, whatever happened with that NASDAQ thing? And then you'll do a Google search for it and you won't find anything from the last 2 years. You'll be like, wait a minute, it just kind of fell off.
I was like, yeah, we thought about it, and then we kind of did some stuff, and then some stuff happened, and then hey, look over here.
Right. And then it'll be like, oh, we're gonna revisit that.
Right.
In the coming quarters or whatever.
Look, I think so. It is going to be interesting to see what the SEC comes back and says, right? I think the biggest thing is that NASDAQ wants, like, if you don't meet it, you get delisted, right? Mm-hmm. So you're no longer listed in NASDAQ, which, okay, that's a pretty big thing, for a company to be like, okay, well, if we're not listed here, then, so then it's like, but what does that mean for the company now? What do they have to do? Things of that nature. So, and I looked at it as this, even though I saw the same holes that you did, I was like, but you know what? I'm fine with starting here, because the result is like, the end game is we're going to delist you, right? So if that's the consequence, then let's figure out what we're going to work back with from there and see how the SEC comes back and says, well, we want this, or maybe we do these things of that nature. But where the conversation is being had at a level that I'm comfortable with having, because like these are big things that's going to make board members and C-suites go, okay, we at least got to talk about it, right?
Yeah, we can't avoid it.
Right. Besides the like, oh, okay, well, we just hired somebody and like you ain't really like, here's our chief executive or chief diversity officer, and it's like, yeah, you can come to the meetings, but you ain't come to the meetings. Like,
right.
It means when we talking about like what we got to do with the company, like we just come to these meetings. Like, no, this is okay. We got to talk about this at this meeting because this is the consequence we could face. Right now, granted, they may come up with and say, all right, let's go play the lawyer game, blah blah blah. What we can do, file exception, all that stuff, or whatever. But here's the thing: the conversations being had at that level that they're reinforced to have that they weren't. And I recognize at least a step when none was there before. So now it's like, now we got that step. Let's continue to build on that. Like what I would want to see in the call of arms that I say is like, okay, look, let's build on this. Like, let's start throwing more and more stuff out there like this to where it's like, okay, maybe we dodged this NASDAQ bullet, but dang, now it's this, now it's this. Now it's like, okay, yes, now we really need to make this a part of what we do going forward, right? That's the, I think it's funny, like it's specifically in my expertise in identity access management, right? Like compliance was always the thing, right? The more compliant regulations came out, it was like, all right, now you have to do this and now you have to do this. And once you have that stick, now it's just, okay, now you're going to write a check for this because you need to do this. Okay, great. Now you're going to write for this because you need to do this. Because at the end of the day, it's like, all right, well, these checks that I'm writing here, number one, I start to see the benefit, but it's less than the check I'm going to have to write if this happens, right? And once I see that it's actually going to happen, it's the same thing I said when GDPR, like no company's going to take it seriously until that first fine gets through, right? And then when they see that,
everybody does.
Yeah, when they see that fine get him, be like, they had to write checks. Remember them letters we was talking about, the R, the G, the U? What we doing about that? Because I don't want to write that check. We ain't about that life over here. So let's get that. And that's, unfortunately, just kind of sometimes what it takes. So it's something to watch. It's something I'm going to keep watching, see how it progresses.
Same.
Hey, what's up, C3 Squad? Back again to let you guys know about my favorite watch company is Bronzeville Watch Company. And you guys know I've raved about these watches. If you guys saw the last one I did, really love these watches, have one of these pieces myself. And I've actually been waiting for some new pieces to drop so I can go ahead and order. So I'm going to be actually placing my order pretty soon. Right now, you're getting free shipping with all the orders. And also, hey, ladies, it is official. They now have ladies' watches as well. I want to introduce you guys to the Rose Gold Classy Lady Renaissance Automatic. This is a beautiful piece. So to all my Lady C3 Squad members, you're looking for a nice watch to add to your collection, definitely suggest Bronzeville. For all my male watchers, of course, C3 Squad members, you guys know you can hit up all the other watches or give this for your lady of choice, your mom, your sister, whoever. Hook them up with a nice, classy watch. Bronzeville Watch Company, hit them up. Let them know the C3 Squad sent you.
So we're gonna switch to a little different topic. We're gonna talk about yo HU. We gonna
what exactly could you ever have to say with a side about the Howard University?
Oh my gosh, the Howard. See, look, and we at the HBCU coalition of all of us alumni, right? We came and we talked about it. Y'all HU wasn't there. We left.
Oh, we weren't invited.
And we said, okay, look, y'all, we gonna have to let them have this one. Like we can't, like, we know how HU is, we know how them Bison do, but like this one, we gonna have to let them have it. We all agree, like, look, you know what? We gonna stand with y'all. We gonna tolerate y'all for now with this. But for those of you that don't know, so we're talking about the Howard University. It's HBCU. I went to North Carolina A&T, the best HBCU, but we're not here about that debate right now.
Let's move on.
But what a historic moment, right? So for those of you who don't know, Vice President-Elect Kamala Harris was a graduate of HU. She's also an AKA.
Yes.
And so with all of the other, ceilings and records and all the stuff that she shattered on her rise to this position, right? It was a big thing for HBCU, all alum, just to see, kind of one of us made it. As much as we all just kind of, pick on each other and all those different things, at the end of the day, we really are like one big family with HBCU.
Yeah.
You'll know that if you ever meet somebody that from HBCU, we like family to where it's like, no, I can talk about my cousin.
Right. You
can't talk about my cousin. Like, trust me. Say something about HBCU and you ain't in the clique. It's
a problem.
Real quick. You're gonna find out. You're gonna find out your nice safe black friend wasn't really all that safe. You can say something wrong. You be like, wait, I don't. What's gotten into you? I've never.
Yeah, we kind of stay ready for this. We do.
So, but yeah, so just I guess I would love to hear from you on like as the moment happened, right? Like, you know, what you felt, what you thought, like conversations maybe that you might have had with your daughter, because I can say for me, I was just it was remiss. It was same as what happened when Barack got elected. Just this kind of accomplishment, this like I'm watching history type of thing. And this one was for the same, but I knew that it meant so much more, you know, especially when she made the you know, the comment about, you know, her nieces, right? Yeah. And, you know, being able to look up and see that. So I thought that was huge. But so this HU alumni, fellow Bison, how did it feel to watch your fellow Bison alumni get elected as the next vice president?
So let me tell you this. First of all, I have a couple of contrarian views about this. So I hope you're ready for that.
All right, here we go.
Because I think, number one, let me just focus on the moment itself and the symbolism of the moment, right? So I remember I kind of checked out from the election itself because it was just, you know, we were on day 55 of it or whatever of the election coverage. And I just, you know, it was a Saturday, right? So I was like, look, they probably figure it out by December. So I'll check back in at that point. And so when the network started calling the election, so I'm on Facebook, just scrolling. And when I say my timeline, I mean, it was crazy, David. It was just so many people from Howard, and some of them like heartfelt, some of the like old head alumni, because we have a huge like alumni group, and then we have one that's just from anybody who was there from like 98 to 04, 05. And so both of those groups, I mean, just tears and just pride and just so much shit talking, like more than wife. I mean, telling people make sure you update your resumes. If you went to Howard, that needs to be at the top. I mean, it was crazy, right? And then all my AKA friends, like one of my clients actually is an AKA, and she said she strutted so much that day, and she had like set it off playing in the background, like she could not. She said she pulled a muscle, like, and if you know her, it's funny because she's very like corporate, like buttoned up. And so it was too funny because she was saying how it's like she lost her voice with all the ski weed. Like she just could not even, like all day long in her house, mind you, right, by herself. And so seeing all of the celebration, somebody said they were going to do some swag surfing at the inauguration. Like that was going to be a thing. Somebody said HU homecoming is happening. Even though we thought it was canceled, it actually is going to be January 2021. So I don't know if that's a real thing. Like, but these are all the things that were coming out the day of, right? I think it also was just the symbolism of seeing. I think a part of me was sad, honestly, because I was just like, but it's 2020, and why is this just happening, right? Like. And why did it have to happen like this? So it was more one of those things like, man, I know so many brilliant Black people. I know so many brilliant Black women. And it's no shade to Kamala because it's not about like her, but it's about the fact that why couldn't it have been her 10 years ago? Right. Or somebody else 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And one of the things that I appreciate about Howard that was always instilled in us is that it was always about leadership for America and the global community. Like from day one, you get there and you go to your little pinning ceremony. It's leadership for America and the global community. And it's not one of those things that we just took lightly. Like they literally developed leaders. So a part of me is just like, yeah, I know the rest of the world is excited because it's like HBCU Celebration Day, because they also were focusing on Keisha Lance Bottoms, and who else? Oh, Stacey Abrams, you know. So it was kind of like, look at how these Black women who all went to HBCUs really delivered this election result. But I think a part of me was just like, y'all, we've been great. you're just now figuring it out, but we've been great. Like, we've been amazing. We've been innovative. We've been groundbreaking. We have been impactful. That's who we are. It's in our DNA. And with the products of HBCUs and the products of Howard University, I mean, I don't know people who are just like doing regular stuff, like, oh, they graduated and they just went and got a job and they kind of just moved up. It's like everybody is doing these things that are groundbreaking. So part of me is like, the rest of the world is just getting the memo, but I've known this. And why has it taken this long?
Right.
Like, why is she the first? So when they show the graphic of Kamala in comparison to all of the vice presidents and how she was the first woman and she's the first woman of color, I'm like, but it's 20, like, so it's one of those things, like, why is she the first? So on the flip side of it, and this is where the contrarian part comes in, I remember early in the primaries, right? So, David, you remember the Democratic primaries, and you remember it was like 25 of them, right? They all on the stage, they going in on each other. I mean, pulling up old receipts, and remember who did this? They were coming for Joe. They came hard for him because he had plenty of receipts. He's been in Washington for 50 years. Right. They're like, remember back in 73, you voted on this, this, and this, you know? So it was all of this going on. And I remember in the primaries, I kind of, like, I paid attention to Kamala, and there was something about her. I was like, well, she all right, but I didn't feel like I wasn't connected, right? And so I think it's hard as a Black woman, as a graduate of Howard University, to not necessarily be aligned with the politics, right? Not necessarily be aligned with the track record of this person, but still be in full celebration of what it represents. And to be okay with saying that, right? Because you know what kind of culture we live in. Like, you say anything that is in contrary to what the masses believe, then you're canceled. You know what I mean? Or you're hating or whatever, like, fill in the blank. And so it was one of those things where people, because they knew I graduated from Howard and because they obviously know that I'm a Black woman, it was like automatically I should be in this, like, I should agree with everything. This is my girl. I voted for her in the primaries. I was just like, y'all, she wasn't my first pick.
Right.
Just know that. Like, and that's okay. Like, I can disagree with some of her politics and still celebrate the moment. And I think we got to give ourselves freedom to have, like, just free thought, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes as Black people, we get very, very pigeonholed into, you must vote this way, you must believe in this thing. So, I mean, I felt a little conflicted in that day because I was just like, I love the symbolism of it. I am saddened that it has taken this long, but I'm also clear about there were some of her politics I'm concerned about and that I'm watching for.
Yeah.
So that was, all of that was my reaction.
Yeah. And that's, look, I'll agree with you 1,000%. I was not, I talked to my best friend about it. Like, I'm not a fan. I like, and I'm just not, right. Yeah. But I appreciate the moment, what it stands for. And I don't know, I've always been very objective when I looked at things, right. And I've just gotten to a point where I realized that not everybody is quite as objective and can look at things in a certain way. And so I get that. But so I looked at like, just like all of her life and just all the areas and the things that she did and whatever. And I was like, okay, there's some things here that I don't quite agree with, this, that, or whatever. Okay, it is what it is. But like, it's an accomplishment nonetheless. It sets a, you know, I'm able to look at the things that I don't agree with, but I'm also able to look at the bigger picture. And I was like, okay, but putting that aside, you know, I don't have any kids. So if I had a daughter though, like, you know, and she asked me like, Daddy, could I be vice president or could I be president?
Yeah.
I'm appreciative of the fact that now I can have something I can point her to and be like, yes, you can. And here's somebody that looks like,
yeah,
right. That, so that I was like, okay, I'm going to take that now for her. And I'm very critical of every single politician because I take all of this very seriously. I'm like, so what are you setting? What are you doing? I was not a Barack Obama fan at all when he was going through. I was like, yo, I was reading his books. I was talking to stuff what he was talking about. I didn't like his politics. You know what I did like though? I loved his message and I loved the fact that he had an ability to connect people. And I was like, for what he's getting ready to do and what he wants to do, that's going to serve him well. And I think at the time what the country needed from that leadership perspective was somebody who could connect with different people and get them to come to the table, which is what he was very good at. And so I saw that. But like his politics, man, if ever I actually become any kind of a public figure, decide to do anything, the receipts is out there. I went in on Barack. I was like, what is this? What is this? What is that? He's talking this and this, that, or whatever, just because I was looking at what he was very hopeful, which was cool. But I was like, look at reality.
Yeah.
Right? Like the things that you want to do, you can't change in 8 years, brother. We ain't been able to change in this country in 50, 100. And like, so how do you think you're gonna get these done in 8? I thought it was just a very like naive type of step. But at the time, like I saw quickly what the country needed, right? Like, because anytime, like, the skill to be able to reach and connect with somebody. And I think Kamala's got a little bit of this. Like, I haven't, like, I don't know, like a switch. I felt like either a switch or like her team from the primaries to win.
Coach, come on, David. They got her all the way together. When I say they got her all the way together, because I used to joke with my friend about how she would get on TV. She does this weird squint where she'd be like, yeah, I'm talking to you, but I'm not really here. Like, so she seemed like she wasn't, like, I never could feel her, good or bad.
Right.
Like, even the most abhorrent politicians, I'm like, ugh, can't stand this person. I can at least feel them, because I feel like, oh, you're saying what you actually mean. And This is not a script. And you also are bringing your whole self, whether or not I like it. But with her, it was like, I don't know, like, what's happening? It was like, it was puppety to me. It was very, and it lacked any kind of, like, she did not emote. Right. And so there was not, like, I think I had similar challenges with Barack, but I always felt him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I always felt Barack. Anytime he spoke, I always felt him. And so even though when Obamacare came out, and if you're somebody who's worked independently, you know what the cost and benefits used to be, and then what it changed to, that I'm not going to go on that rant, but like, I am not a fan of Obamacare. I've gone on record and said that I think it was, for me, as someone who was already relatively healthy and already had like an independent healthcare plan and wasn't under a group plan, I saw the drastic change. It did not work out for me. It might have worked out for somebody, but it did not work out for me. Yeah. It did not work out for my kids. It was just bad all around. So, there are some of the politics that I'm just kind of like, okay, y'all want to do what? Who's gonna pay for that? Like, how are we gonna pay for that? Oh, it's gonna be $50 trillion over 2 years. Where's that? We already in that. Like, where's the money coming from? Like, so.
I think at this point, we get to a point where we just make up numbers. This was $8 trillion. Like,
listen, I figured that out during the pandemic. Do you remember how all of a sudden we just had money to print? Like, when those first round of stimulus checks came out, and they were like, oh, we just approved a $300 trillion relief package. $300 trillion? Well, where did this money come from? I thought we were broke, because before it was like, oh, we can't pass that program, we don't have the money. All of a sudden we had the money. So I was like, okay, they just moved zeros around. Just
look, I'm gonna tell you, and this is gonna be, and I gotta be very careful how I create this, but like, trust me, a series is coming this year on this podcast. Well, I'm gonna start telling people, like, look, we're gonna start following some money. Right. And start showing some principles of money. Because one of the things that I tell people all the time, it was like, when you like, personal finance is the cheat code to life. Because here's what you're going to learn. Personal finance and or business finance. To me, they're the same thing. Right. First of all, that's the first point they gave you. Business finance, personal finance. They separated the two. It's the same thing. Finance is finance. Money is money. Right. Assets, liabilities, they don't change.
Yeah.
And what you can do with them is all based on like what you can apply in your taxes. But anyway, we're going to get into that. I'll get into that. But it's like, once you understand money and the way it moves, I'm trying to tell you, it's like Neo in the Matrix. You're gonna walk around and be like, what the?
Yeah, like, it's so true. It's so true.
Right now, what happens is people sit down and they just, they hear this, like, oh yeah, $300 trillion, we're gonna do this, and the Fed's gonna do this, and we're gonna raise the rates, and people are just like, yeah, okay. And I was like, look, and it doesn't take a whole lot. Right. But when you understand like finance and what they're doing, like it's I will say this, like, there is the bill's gonna come due, right? Like,
exactly.
Money didn't come out of nowhere. We didn't magically create it. The bill is going to come due, right? And now, like, it's, and I don't say that meaning we shouldn't have done it. That's not the point. But it's like, there's a consequence to everything that you do. That's just life, right? Whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. Like there's something that you've got to. Nothing is free in this world. If I want to take a step, something has to happen, right? Energy has to get moved and stuff like that or whatever. So part of why I'm going to be very watchful and involved with this administration is because kind of a lot like the Obama administration, they have a lot that they have to now manage. Right? Like taking over a country in the middle of a pandemic, a world pandemic we haven't seen in over a century. Now they got to come and manage all this stuff, right? Yeah. That's like saying, okay, well, yeah, you can buy my business. Okay, great. Here's this debt book. And like, these dudes come around like every month.
Yeah.
And kind of want their money and they don't really ask about it nicely. But anyway, it's yours now. Bye. Have fun, right? Like that. Those are
and I didn't really keep good records of everything.
Yeah,
so like just go through this spiral notebook and you'll see some things scribbled and you could just piece it together.
Yeah, but you got it. You figure it out. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, so look, there are some things that we are going to, as a country, and this administration is going to have to do some big decisions they're going to have to make. And yeah, well, I'll leave it there. I've debated whether or not I ever want to have a politics discussion on this podcast.
I know, you know what? I do my best. Honestly, I feel like my hands are so full with the whole piece around eradicating systemic racism in corporate spaces. Like my hands are over. I mean, I can't. It's too much, right? So I try to stay in my lane. Like, let me focus on that because I feel like if we start digging into and uncovering the politics side, I would get so sucked into that I would neglect this other thing that is extremely important. But I think at some points there is an intersection, right? There is a point where you have to talk about it. And I think also just for enlightenment, like I so encourage every individual, I don't care what you look like, I don't care if you're purple, green, whatever, like you have to read and study for yourself. You cannot just consume news. Like consuming news, consuming headlines. I did this experiment early in the pandemic when they were doing the presidential task force briefings, every day. And I did an experiment for a couple of weeks where I would just channel surf, right? It's the exact same briefing, but I would go MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, and just kind of channel surf, same briefing, headlines completely different. When I say it would be, now CNN, we know they're good for everything's breaking news, whatever. But they would have things at the bottom of the screen. I'd be like, well, that's not really what he said. Or he said that, but earlier, and it was out of context, and you're putting it on the screen now as if that's what he's talking about. That's not it. So I'm not coming for CNN in particular. I'm not coming for Fox News or MSNBC, but I do think that we have this group think, right? And people are not actually looking, like read transcripts of what's actually being said. Right. Typically, they are available. You can find the transcript for almost anything. And if you can't find it, you can get one made for like $2.
Right.
But like read transcripts of what's actually being said versus like listening to the spin.
Read though. Like
yeah, David, I can't solve all this today.
I know. Look,
I don't have all the solutions today. I mean, but I think that's the problem. Just like, please, like, let's stop it. Let's like really educate ourselves and make informed decisions about how we vote, about what we support and what we don't support, and not because it is associated with the group, not because it is somehow associated with our gender or our race or whatever. But it's because we have made a personal informed decision. I mean, honestly, if you think about the whole political system it's designed to empower the individual. Yep. Like that's what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be about groupthink, but that's what it's turned into. I digress. I'm gonna get off your podcast with this because I'm gonna actually promote you. Like, David, let me know if you're gonna do one on politics now. I'll come back for that.
No, look, I think there's some we're gonna talk about it because there are a couple of like I think I want to do almost like special event podcasts where I have some panels and stuff like that where I want to get some people and just and have more curated discussions on some of these topics, right? So I'm working on it. Look, people, I'm trying to figure out how to turn into a media mogul. Y'all know me. I'm gonna get there. We're gonna put some stuff together. We'll figure it out. So look, we're gonna transition to the last segment of our podcast because like I realized that me and JaNae will sit here and talk for like 3-4 hours. Man, they gonna shut up. But I love it though. So I number one, thanks for coming on and taking the time to be on the podcast. It's
Absolutely
fantastic. But I do want to. I ended all at the same time. Like I asked everybody the same question. So if you haven't heard any of the podcast, you got to get ready for this question. If you had of the podcast, you ready. But this final segment, I like to call the last sip. All right, so we come to the segment called the last sip, and it's still I blame this all on hydrocodone. Like, because for a month I was out and high on hydrocodone after I had my ankle surgery. So when I came back, I know how to use my mixing board. Like, I don't know what buttons is what, and I just can't remember them no more. So, but thank God for post editing. I will fix that. So call the segment the last sip, and I end with the same question to all my guests is, what do you want your legacy to be?
Ooh, yeah. So I think that is one that is a great question, and two, I think it continues to evolve for me. But I always have wanted to be known as someone who has not just accepted things as they are if those things are not right. And to advocate for those who have not found their voice yet. Because I'm clear that for some people, they're just not at a space where they can speak up. Either it's because they are gripped by fear, or it's because they have situations in their life that don't allow them to speak up, or maybe because of their position. Even more specifically, I understand that there are people who are still wanting to maintain their employment. And so because of that, they're not in a place where they can actually speak up because they have a reasonable fear of backlash. And so I think for me, I want to always be a voice for the people who are silent. I want to always be someone who looks at things and says, this is not right, and we're not going to continue to do this just because it's already been done, just because it continues to be done, or just because the majority of people are okay with it. And so I hope that no matter what it is, whether it's advocating for Black people in corporate spaces, or it's really pushing companies to find ways to create equitable workplaces, or if it's, I do a lot of speaking engagements with women and really showing them that there's more to your life beyond what you can see in front of you based on my own life experiences, to give them hope, to give them something to anchor to, no matter what it is, right? I may end up I might be like a TV writer or a producer or a director, right? Like I watched an episode of Queen Sugar a year ago, and I was like, oh, I think I want to be a director, because Ava DuVernay was putting all these new directors on. Right. So I was like, oh, okay, I think I want to do that. So no matter what it is that I end up doing, I want my legacy to be about speaking up for people who are silent, and also challenging things that are wrong and making sure that they get corrected.
Okay. It's an awesome legacy to have.
We'll see if I get it done.
You'll get it done. You'll get there. Even though you went to HU, that won't hold you back.
Here we go.
Look,
the only reason you get a pass, the only reason is because I'm an Aggie mom now. Because my baby girl just got into A&T. That is the only reason. Otherwise, I would have been pulling out receipts, like doing a screen share. Like, okay, here are all the HU grads. This is what we've done. Now your turn.
Oh, see, all right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't want to go there though. It's cool. It's cool. It's cool. Look, always. You know what? We ain't gonna do it. We're gonna let HU have a moment.
We're gonna stay in solidarity today. We're gonna stay in solidarity.
All right, everybody. Well, as you guys know, appreciate everybody listening to the next cocktail, to the next conversation. Y'all stay safe out there. Cocktails, Code, and Conversation is brought to you by the On the Corner Media Group. Check us out at onthecorner.us for more great content.